Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Empowering Hope podcast. My name is Justin Boothby, and today I am joined by Jessica Gage. Jessica Gage, what was your last name before you got married?
My maiden name was Johnson.
Johnson,
People
that's
called me
what I
JJ.
thought.
Yeah,
JJ, okay. Oh my gosh. I thought it was Johnson, but I wasn't sure. So I'm joined by Jessica Gage, not Jessica Johnson. And Jess and I actually go back to high school. We've known each other, what did we say, 14 years?
Yeah, 14, 15 years.
So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast with us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about mental health and how Jess is doing her part to ensure that Christians have a better understanding and a better grasp on how we can integrate, I would say, mental health into our lives as Christ followers, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
So my name's Jess. I'm a licensed counselor in Pennsylvania. I've been doing this now for 10 years, which we were also just discussing. It's so crazy. I also supervise postgraduate, so people who have earned a degree and are now also trying to become licensed in Pennsylvania. And I do some speaking around the city about the very topics that we're talking about today.
Okay, so you're doing it all.
Yeah, it's fun. I feel like I'm a person who's not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid of the questions people ask me, and so we get into some good discussions.
Yeah, I was going to say, because in your notes here, I think it says, isn't afraid to stir the pot.
I love to stir a pot, people. But then I stay in the mess with people. Like, okay, let's hash this out together. Let's figure out what the tough questions are and deal with it.
See, I love stirring the pot, but I'm also like, I want to please people at the same time. And it's like, I got to find that balance of like, what pot is appropriate to stir?
Oh, that's a good one. That's an important question.
Maybe that's a whole podcast in and of itself, I
How
think.
many pots can you
Okay, while we're kind of talking fun here, do you have a fun story you'd like to share?
Okay, so it's really difficult. I think anybody who is a mom knows that once you become a mom, it's really difficult to embarrass. So whenever I was thinking of a story, I instead landed on the story of why I really don't embarrass easily. And it harkens back to whenever we had my son. It was kind of a traumatic birth. So I was in the hospital for a couple of days before and a few days after. And during the time after he was born, I was all set up in my hospital room with my pump going. And the chaplain walked in unannounced without knocking. And so I'm sitting there just like, staring at the chaplain, and he's looking at me. He's mortified. I'm like, is my baby okay? Like, I don't really know what's happening.
Right, yeah.
And he just turns around and walks away. I did pass him in the hospital hallways a couple of times after that. We just like averted our eyes and just kept going. But yeah,
but you weren't really embarrassed,
no,
but he was.
I had bigger things on my mind. I felt bad for him, but that was
sure, yeah. Well, I mean, he's a chaplain in a hospital,
it's
right?
True. I'm sure he's seen many things.
Seen way other things.
I'm sure.
All right. So tell me a little bit about why you went into being a counselor and specifically working with mental health.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I knew I wanted to be someone who could help mediate. I had friends whose parents were getting divorced, and I knew there were people who could like help them in those situations. And actually, my second grade teacher told my mom whenever I was a kid that I would probably grow up to be a counselor, and they both told me that on graduation day after I'd already like declared a major and was ready to go. So that's exciting. Like I feel like I am gifted in this field, and then the mental health piece has kind of come in as a kind of tangent to that. So counseling, I think people often refer to as like the talk therapy parts of things without necessarily understanding the mental health side. So for me, it's important to integrate those things together.
Okay. So in our notes here, one of the things that we talk about, there's a lot of myths, right?
Yes,
there are a lot of myths about mental health. Yeah. And you know, so in theology, we would call it folk theology, right?
Things. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, maybe we could call it like
folk psychology.
Folk psychology, yeah. Things that we think that are true, things that are kind of spoken out throughout communities that we think are true, but really aren't. And so maybe if you'd like to, if you could go through and debunk some of these myths that we have.
Yes, I would love it.
As far as mental health goes.
Yeah, I'm all about it. Okay. The
Let's
first one, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
So one of the myths that I hear all the time is that if a Christian is experiencing a mental health issue, they just need to pray more or have more faith or go to church or a healing service, which those things can be wonderful and can be a part of that. But statistically and in terms of like biochemical stuff in our bodies, there are just other things going on. So that's not the answer for everyone. There's genetic stuff, there's chemistry stuff, there's just situational stuff. And I think that if we just kind of rush to we'll pray about it some more, I think that we're missing a huge piece of what's really going on inside of a person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just praying about something. Okay, sure. We were both Christ followers. We both believe in the power of prayer.
Please do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But there's so much more to it than just praying or just having more faith. And yeah, that's a good myth to debunk.
In the episode you did with Mike Matthews, he said, what was it? The Bible in the hands of, Mike, what was it? The Bible in the wrong hands is a hammer. Something like that. And I was like, yes, that's so true.
It's so true.
We have to be careful of that in this field for sure.
Yeah. Mind if I read the next myth?
Please do. I love it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So myth number 2, a person dealing with mental or emotional illnesses cannot lead in ministry. Woo!
Guys, cut this out. Really. I tell people all the time, I've counseled pastors and their families and all kinds of people. And for us to expect our pastors and our church leaders to have 100% good days is just outrageous. It's not helpful. And in fact, 23% of pastors, I get a little geeky on this, 23% of pastors who've been polled have reported some kind of mental health issue.
Only 23%?
Right.
So I would expect it to be way higher than that.
And I think it's partially because it's misunderstood. So they think it's a rough time, they think it's burnout, but there are mental health issues that mimic those things. So
yeah. Good. Anything else you'd like to hit on that?
I mean, we could have so many podcasts on all of these things.
Okay, myth number 3. I'm the only person who is feeling this way.
That one makes me feel really sad because, so statistically, 1 in 4 Americans each year experience some kind of mental illness stuff. And then chronically over time that doesn't go away is 1 in 17. So certainly not alone. And certainly not even alone in our churches. There are more than 4 people in our churches, and so there are plenty of people who feel the same way.
Well, including pastors. And for me, I'm very big on authenticity, on just being real. You don't have to share every tiny detail of who you are as a pastor, but just be real. Just be yourself. Don't try to be a celebrity pastor. Make it seem like you have everything together. Just be a real person. If you're struggling with something, let your elders know, let your board know, let people know that you're struggling with those things so they can come alongside you and help you in that. A book that I've read recently by Wayne Cordero is Leading on Empty.
Ooh.
It's a good book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good book. I'll just plug that into here for you guys if you ever want to. If you're a leader in ministry or you're a leader in any form, not just ministry, in any form, I highly recommend Leading on Empty. So yeah, we can go into that a little bit more another time.
I'm fortunate to go to a church where our pastors are very transparent with those things and then have incorporated that into their ministry and have empowered other people. It's beautiful.
Yes, it
Love
makes
it.
all the difference.
Love it.
All right, next myth. There's nothing I can do for something who...
For someone.
Sorry. That's okay. There's nothing I can do for someone who is suffering with a mental illness. People believe that?
They do. I think partially because they don't necessarily know how to talk about it. How do you start the conversation? So I tell people there are tons of things you can do. You can love someone up close and bring them food or help watch their kids so they can go upstairs and cry for a while or something like that. But then there are other ways we can love on people from a distance. So just sending a note or shooting somebody a text. If you don't know what to say, send an emoji or send a funny meme. Just being present, I think, is one of the most important ways we can be there for each other.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. Mental illness, this is the last one I guess we have here. Mental illness is not the same as physical illness, so medication is wrong or sinful. Oh, this hurts my soul.
It hurts my soul, and it hurts the soul of a lot of my clients.
Yeah.
That kind of myth really kind of permeates, I think, Christian culture sometimes, and we really need to be careful of it. I recently lost my mom to cancer, and I can't imagine if someone had said, well, just skip the chemo. You just need to have more faith.
Oh my gosh.
And so whenever we treat mental health issues that way, because there are active brain chemistry things happening with mental illness, and so whenever we skip over that and just expect it to go away when we try harder, it doesn't support people.
Yeah. Kind of sidestepping for a second, one of the things I've really struggled with my entire life is depression in some form or manner. It does run in my family. And so for somebody who's dealing with, I would say a deeper season of depression. You know, you go, I would say you go through different seasons of depression at different, would that be accurate?
So clinically, there's a huge book over there. Clinically, there are many stages and types of depression, and there are just different kinds of criteria to see which one you'd meet. But it makes sense that there are different phases, and some seasons feel heavier and that sort of thing.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who, how do I want to say this? If you know somebody who's struggling with depression, what would you say to that person? How would you have them engage with somebody who's dealing with depression?
So I think that it partially depends on the level of closeness that you have with someone.
Sure.
So I think whenever anybody's struggling with the heavier kind of depression, they want a listening ear. They want somebody to come alongside them and just listen to what they have to say, even if it's the same thing that they said yesterday. Right. Even if it feels like we're being a downer, like we need somebody to hear us in those moments. So seeing that your friend as a person through the depression, like pushing that stuff aside and remembering who they are, and just joining them in it, like getting in the mess with people, like that is what this is.
Yes. Yeah. My friend Eric, one of the things that he'll do, if he knows I'm going through a particularly rough time, he'll say, all right, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to actually, you know, give you suggestions or advice? And I think that's powerful, because that's giving the person an option to, I would say, have the power of how that conversation's going to go. And having that ear can go a very, very long way. Yeah. So, okay. Well, how can we do better as Christ followers integrating mental health practices into our churches and our ministry? So, in my practice, some of my clients are believers and some are not. Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I respect whatever someone is coming in
Sure.
with. Some clients come in and they're like, yeah, I don't want any of the faith stuff. So we talk about how to find hope in other ways. Yeah. But I also have clients who are coming in believers who are struggling and wrestling with difficult questions, and others who are on fire and they want to be praying together. And I feel like, for me, no matter who is coming in with what aspect of their faith history, I see how psychology and Christianity are tied together. I don't think that it's an accident that God created us in this world that we can observe, and he gives us intelligence to study those things. Yeah. And he's an orderly God, and so he allows us to see the order in things and then to kind of redeem the fallen world. Sure. And so for me, I think many times we want to believe that our churches are immune to mental health stuff. We don't want to think that our pastor could be depressed. We don't want to think that there might be an abusive situation, or somebody in our congregation has a personality disorder. So I think sometimes we're afraid to start those conversations, or we don't know how to respond. But I think as Christians, there are kind of two aspects. I think top down, like leadership talking about these things. Like I said, my pastors are great with that kind of stuff. Kind of normalizing things, making space, having support groups in their churches. And then the rest is like peer-to-peer, right? So having that listening ear from our friends, or even feeding up to our pastors, like how can we be lifting you up and supporting you in this? How can we be supporting your family members while they're kind of coming alongside you in this? So yeah, I think we're all gifted uniquely. So whatever you're good at, do that thing for those people you love. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Good. So for me, being a young Christian and struggling through depression, I mean, there's all sorts of different mental health issues with teenagers and young people. What would you say are some of the hot topics that they're dealing with today, especially in this world?
So I would say the biggest are probably anxiety and depression, especially actually with social media.
Yeah.
There has to be a correlation, even if it's not causation, between the amount of social media that kids consume and their levels of anxiety.
I'm sure.
Comparison stuff that goes on there, and also like the bullying that is instantaneous. Like, so since we've known each other forever, when we were kids, like you passed notes, or like people were talking about you in the hallway, and it like took a while for a rumor.
It still spread throughout the day, but it still took a while, right?
And usually something more interesting happened by the end of the day, right? Like they forgot about the thing that happened to us that was weird.
That's true.
And so now, like, something happens, somebody like trips in the hallway, so a kid tweets about it, everybody knows about it instantaneously, and that kid knows that everybody knows.
And not only that, but it sticks, right?
Yes.
It's not forgotten at the end of the
black
day.
and white
It's
on the internet.
still there.
Yep.
Everybody and their mother can see it in Russia if they wanted to.
Yep.
You know?
And another dangerous part of that is all of the sex stuff that's happening,
Yeah.
especially on social media. So somebody pressures a girl into sending a picture that she might not have been comfortable sending, or she was, and she was trusting that guy, and then he sends it to all of his friends. And they send it to who? Like, it's just out there.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing such a shift legally. Like, people are trying to really call out these issues because it's really detrimental stuff.
Yeah.
I think a huge piece of that, so let me back up. A big chunk of what I do is sex therapy. Oftentimes it's Christian couples coming in saying, we waited and we were expecting this like really hot sex whenever we finally got together, like flipped a switch, right? And I come in here and I'm like, listen, guys, we'll talk about all of it, but they lied to you. Like, how do you say that? So I think as Christians, we really need to be talking more about sex.
Yes.
On my Instagram, I just did an enrichment challenge to like remind people of the basics to be building up. And I think whenever we avoid those conversations in our churches, then a few things happen. One, our young people are only receiving messages outside the church, and I don't think that's what parents and leaders really want either. But another part of it is shame. Like then it's a topic we don't talk about. So if kids have ideas or urges or whatever, they're not going to their parents, they're not going to their Christian leaders. So where can they turn? They're turning to the kid who just tweeted about the other kid falling in the hallway. Like, that's not where we want our sex ed to be coming from. So I think that we need to be having more conversations about sexual health in addition to all the other things that are going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually remember, Matt, I had no idea that we were going to go down this road.
Here we are.
But here we are.
Podcast life.
But when I was a youth pastor, we were at camp and we were with a bunch of high school boys, right? And we were in a cabin, and it came up, you know. It was one of those things where it was like, let's just deal with it. Let's talk about the M word for a second. And in that conversation, it sparked one of the most important relationships I had with one of the kids, because he had all these questions and we had this great relationship just because we were open about it and we talked. They're high school boys, you know, they all know about it, they're all talking about it, you know, probably most of them are all doing it, right? And so I came back from that retreat and I got in trouble. I was in trouble, I'm not going to tell you by who, but I was in trouble with two people. And the one person told me, well, you know, the one person who was supposed to support me basically said, well, you know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and you probably shouldn't have brought it up. And I'm like, why not? Like, it's a bunch of high school boys in a cabin on a week-long retreat. Why can't we just have open and honest conversations about these things? Why is it something that has to be so hidden and so shameful until you're married? And then, like you said, it's like, now you have to have this really, really hot sex. You know what I mean?
For real, yeah.
And yeah, we have to do better as a church about opening up about these things.
And that's one of my passions. So I like to go into churches and help them start conversations with their leaders and with the parents so that people aren't left stranded
Right.
getting yelled at, right? Like, so I was actually at a speaking engagement, and a woman came up to me and said she was afraid of talking about masturbation with her son. And I looked at her and I said, you know, he already knows he has a penis. So you bringing it up is not going to like plant some new idea in his mind. Like, he probably has already thought about it. So why not engage in that conversation? Why not be authentic? Because those conversations at an early age, it's not a sex talk, it's a sex conversation. You're starting this dialogue. So the earlier we can start those things with our kids, normalize this stuff, it kind of takes that shame away, but it also sets the stage for, you can keep coming back to me with stuff. And I'll keep giving you real information. You don't have to try to trust somebody else to do it. You can be informed going into those conversations with other people.
So let's bring it all around here for a second. How does that deal with mental health?
So whenever I talk to any of my clients about like wellness, I talk about it in terms of the whole person. So whenever we're talking about mental health, there's that like emotional piece. There's also a physical wellness that we need to pay attention to, our minds, our intellectual wellness, and some other different spots. So for me, especially whenever I'm working with couples, which is my passion, I love working with couples, anytime I'm working with someone who is struggling in that area, or they're trying to build trust in that area, kind of debunking the shame that they were raised with, it's important to me to point out that even if you're not experiencing a depression symptom, this is still a part of your mental health because it's something that's weighing heavily on you. And anytime shame is involved, like Satan is a tricky jerk, right? Like he takes something that has an ounce of truth and twists it and tries to hold it over us in a way that Jesus never never wanted that to happen. He never intended that for us. And so when we're looking after our mental health, it really is all of the parts of us. Yeah. And if as Christians we're cutting the sexual parts of ourselves off, then we're not going to be doing ourselves a service. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's something that I've been teaching a lot is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. There's this overwhelming sense of we have to love the Lord with our whole being, right? Not just one part of it. And I like the way you said that. If we cut that part off, we're not really loving the Lord with everything, or at least we're cutting it off and hiding it away until you're married, and then
it's great.
And then out of nowhere, you're supposed to be like this, somebody that you've seen in a porno. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're expected to be this porn star, and that's not how it works. Or you're expected to have like this. We're in the language.
I've heard it all.
Yeah, I mean, you're expected to have like this, I would say, psychedelic orgasm, right? And if you don't have that, what's wrong with you? And that's just not, it's not reality.
Yeah,
it's
and there are also so many, like, that big book that we talked about earlier, there are so many sexual disorders that can be present. And so if no one's been talking to a person throughout their lifespan about sex and what to expect, then if they're experiencing pain during sex, they just think it's supposed to be happening. And so women especially can go years and years being married and have no idea that that's not how it has to be.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's go back to happy for a second.
This is all in my wheelhouse, so I'm fine.
So behind us, we have a hope wall, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Talk to me a little bit about the hope wall.
Okay, so I love that your podcast is empowering hope because it's obviously something really important to me. I think whenever I'm talking about anything mental health with any of my clients, one of the most foundational things I want to send them home with is a little bit of hope. And so I thought, since I can't get all of my clients together and just like have them encourage each other because confidentiality, at least we could collaborate on something that might speak to them as they're coming in and out. So I established this hope wall where clients can create things or bring things in that represent hope to them, like the changing of the seasons and things like that. So we stick that stuff up there and swap it out as people graduate. They take things with them. And yeah, it's been really good. It's been a fun collaboration.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you, I know you've been posting a lot on Instagram lately.
I'm all about Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, let's send out something fast. Like, people don't always have the time to sit down and commit to a huge blog post. So it's an easy way to stay connected.
Yeah. So, and we'll put all those tags in there for you. Everything should be popping up right now. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But you can also find all of her information and all of her contact information in the credits below on this video. Or if you're listening to the podcast, you can also go on to empoweringhope.org/podcast, and you can find all that information there as well. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. If somebody is going through, I would say, an emergency situation where they're on the brink, something really bad is about to happen. You've suggested that you have some different resources, correct?
Yes. So I like what you said. There are different seasons of depression, and different people are qualified to deal with those things. So as a friend, you are not responsible for figuring out, like, is this person going to commit suicide? Is this person going to be safe? So there are resources for you. There are a bunch on my website. The one that I throw out to everyone, I mean, obviously call 911. If there's any concern for somebody's immediate safety, go take care of that. But another option, especially in Allegheny County, is the Resolve Crisis Network. I'm not sure how many people would be familiar with that. It's a free service that's out of Western Psych, and they will call somebody on the phone and like establish safety. They can send somebody to that person's house to make sure that they're okay. So there are lots of resources out there that really help kind of share that responsibility so that we can all be happy and healthy. Yeah.
Good. I will also post all of those in the credits below as well.
Lots of credits, guys.
Lots of credits. Lots and lots of credits. So anything else you'd like to share?
No, this has been great.
Yeah, I love this. This is great. So thank you all so much for joining this week's podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We kind of went down some crazy roads.
Guys.
We weren't anticipating some of those
Counselor
things.
life.
But that's just part of life too, though. There are things that happen throughout life that maybe you don't expect to happen, and sometimes you just need to take it head on, and sometimes you just need to deal with it. And I love how you said it. Just get in the mess.
Yeah.
Right? Just get
Stir
in the
that
mess.
pot.
Stir that pot. So thank you so much for watching the Empowering Hope podcast or listening. Just so you know, you can listen to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and all. We're on everything. So I'll post all those in the credits as well. Thank you once again so much for watching, and we'll see you next week on the Empowering Hope podcast.